Chapter 1. The Last Hope. The alarms blared through the city, a piercing cry that shattered the eerie silence. Amidst the crumbling ruins and the toxic fog, a lone figure darted through the shadows. Zara, her heart pounding in her chest, clutched the precious vial in her hands as she navigated the treacherous landscape. "Zara, do you copy?" A voice crackled through her earpiece. "I'm here, Raven," Zara replied, her voice strained. "I've got the antidote, but the Xenos are hot on my trail." "Get to the extraction point," Raven urged. "The shuttle leaves in 10 minutes. We can't afford to miss it." Zara pushed herself harder, leaping over fallen debris and dodging the deadly laser beams that sliced through the air. The Xenos, a ruthless alien race, had invaded Earth decades ago, decimating the population and poisoning the planet. The remnants of humanity had been fighting a losing battle ever since. But now, with the antidote in her hands, Zara held the key to humanity's survival. If she could just make it to the shuttle, they could escape this dying world and start anew on a distant planet. A deafening roar echoed behind her, and Zara risked a glance over her shoulder. A massive Xeno warrior, its exoskeleton gleaming in the sickly light, charged towards her, its razor-sharp claws extended. Zara's pulse raced as she pushed herself to the limit, her legs burning with exertion. She could see the extraction point ahead, a glimmering beacon of hope in the desolate wasteland. Just as the Xeno warrior closed in, a barrage of laser fire rained down from above. Raven's ship hovered overhead, providing cover fire as Zara sprinted the final distance. With a desperate leap, Zara hurled herself into the open hatch of the waiting shuttle. She collapsed on the floor, gasping for breath, as the hatch sealed shut behind her. "Cutting it a bit close there, Zara," Raven said, a relieved smile on her face as she helped her friend to her feet. Zara managed a weak grin. "You know me, always one for dramatic entrances." As the shuttle lifted off, leaving the ravaged Earth behind, Zara clutched the vial tightly to her chest. The antidote was the last hope for humanity, and she had risked everything to secure it. But their journey was far from over. With the Xenos in pursuit and countless challenges ahead, Zara knew that the battle for survival had only just begun. Chapter 2. The Pursuit. The shuttle shuddered as it broke through the Earth's atmosphere, the once vibrant planet now a desolate wasteland below. Zara stumbled into the cockpit, her heart still racing from the narrow escape. "We've got company," Raven said grimly, her eyes fixed on the radar screen. "Xeno fighters, closing in fast." Zara's stomach dropped. The Xenos were relentless, and they wouldn't give up their prize easily. She glanced at the vial in her hand, the luminescent liquid swirling within. The antidote was the only thing standing between humanity and extinction. "Strap in," Raven ordered, her fingers flying over the controls. "This is going to get bumpy." The shuttle jolted as the first laser blast hit, the shields flickering under the impact. Zara gripped the armrests, her knuckles turning white as Raven twisted the ship into a dizzying evasive maneuver. "They're gaining on us," Zara yelled over the blaring alarms. Raven gritted her teeth, sweat beading on her brow. "I'm giving it everything she's got, but we're outgunned." Another blast rocked the shuttle, sparks cascading from the overloaded systems. Zara's heart pounded in her ears as she watched the Xeno fighters close in on the view screen, their sleek alien designs a stark contrast to the battered human vessel. Just as all seemed lost, a brilliant flash lit up the void. A massive human battleship emerged from the darkness, its weapons blazing as it engaged the Xeno pursuers. "The Prometheus," Zara breathed, relief washing over her. "They must have picked up our distress signal." The battleship's firepower tore through the Xeno fighters, scattering their formation and giving Raven the opening she needed. With a burst of speed, the shuttle raced towards the Prometheus, the larger ship's hangar bay doors sliding open to welcome them. As they touched down inside the cavernous bay, Zara let out a shaky breath. They had made it, but the weight of their mission hung heavy on her shoulders. The hangar doors sealed shut behind them, and a team of armed soldiers rushed forward to secure the shuttle. A tall, imposing figure strode towards them, his uniform adorned with the insignia of a high-ranking officer. "Commander Zara, I presume," he said, his voice deep and authoritative. "I'm Admiral Thorne. We've been expecting you." Zara straightened, meeting the Admiral's piercing gaze. "Admiral, we have the antidote, but the Xenos will stop at nothing to get it back." Admiral Thorne nodded grimly. Then we must ensure they never lay their hands on it. The future of humanity depends on us getting this antidote to the colony. As the Admiral led them deeper into the battleship, Zara couldn't shake the feeling that their journey had only just begun. The Xenos were still out there, and the road ahead was fraught with danger. But with the antidote in their possession and the might of the human fleet at their back, they would face whatever challenges lay ahead, united in their fight for survival. Chapter 3. The Prometheus. The interior of the Prometheus was a hive of activity as Zara and Raven followed Admiral Thorne through the winding corridors. Crew members rushed past, their faces etched with determination and purpose. The air hummed with a sense of urgency, a reminder of the monumental task that lay before them. Admiral Thorne led them into the command center, a vast room filled with holographic displays and bustling technicians. At the center of the room stood a massive holographic projection of the galaxy, dotted with countless stars and planets. "The colony is located here," Admiral Thorne said, pointing to a distant cluster of stars. "It's our last bastion of hope, a hidden sanctuary where we've been rebuilding and preparing for the final stand against the Xenos." Zara stepped forward, studying the map intently. "How long will it take us to reach it?" "At our current speed, about 2 weeks," Admiral Thorne replied. "But we'll need to navigate through Xeno-controlled space, which means we'll face resistance every step of the way." Raven crossed her arms, her brow furrowed. "We'll need to be smart about this. The Xenos will be expecting us to take the most direct route. Maybe we can find an alternative path, one that they won't anticipate." Admiral Thorne nodded approvingly. "That's where you come in, Raven. Your skills as a pilot and your knowledge of the Xenos' tactics will be invaluable in plotting our course." As Raven and the Admiral discussed potential routes, Zara found herself drawn to a display showing the devastation on Earth. The once vibrant cities lay in ruins, the planet's surface ravaged by the Xenos' relentless assault. A lump formed in her throat as she remembered all those they had left behind, the countless lives lost in the struggle for survival. "Commander Zara," Admiral Thorne called, snapping her out of her thoughts. "I need you to work with our science team to analyze the antidote. We need to understand how it works and how we can mass-produce it once we reach the colony." Zara straightened, a sense of purpose filling her. "Of course, Admiral. I'll get started right away." As she turned to leave, the command center suddenly plunged into darkness. Emergency lights flickered to life, casting an eerie red glow across the room. Alarms blared, and the crew scrambled to their stations. "Report," Admiral Thorne barked, his voice cutting through the chaos. "We're under attack, sir," a technician shouted. "A Xeno warship just dropped out of hyperspace. They're closing in fast." The holographic display shifted, revealing the looming silhouette of a massive Xeno vessel, its angular hull bristling with weaponry. Zara's heart raced as she realized the gravity of their situation. The Xenos had found them, and they were determined to reclaim the antidote at any cost. Admiral Thorne's face hardened, his eyes glinting with resolve. "Battle stations. Prepare to engage the enemy. We'll show these Xenos what humanity is capable of." As the crew sprang into action, Zara exchanged a determined look with Raven. They had come too far to fail now. With the antidote in their possession and the might of the Prometheus at their back, they would stand against the Xeno threat and fight for the future of their species. The battle for humanity's survival had only just begun, and Zara knew that the road ahead would be fraught with danger and sacrifice. But in that moment, as the Prometheus prepared to face its greatest challenge yet, she felt a flicker of hope. Together, they would stand against the darkness and fight for a new dawn. Chapter 4. Under Siege. The Xeno warship loomed menacingly on the view screen, its angular hull casting an ominous shadow over the Prometheus. Admiral Thorne stood at the helm, his face etched with determination as he barked orders to the crew. "Raise shields and prime the weapons systems," he commanded. "We need to buy ourselves time to jump to hyperspace." The bridge erupted into a flurry of activity as the crew scrambled to their stations. Zara and Raven stood beside the Admiral, their eyes fixed on the approaching enemy vessel. Suddenly, a barrage of energy blasts slammed into the Prometheus, rocking the ship violently. Sparks flew from overloaded consoles, and the lights flickered precariously. Zara gripped the edge of a nearby console to steady herself, her heart pounding in her chest. "Shields are holding at 70%, a technician reported, his voice strained with tension. Admiral Thorne narrowed his eyes. "Return fire! Target their weapon systems!" The Prometheus's cannons roared to life, launching a volley of missiles and energy beams towards the Xeno warship. The enemy vessel deftly maneuvered, evading most of the incoming fire, but a few well-placed shots found their mark, causing explosions to blossom along its hull. Raven leaned forward, studying the tactical display. "Admiral, I'm detecting a weak point in their shield harmonics. If we concentrate our fire there, we might be able to punch through and deal some real damage." Admiral Thorne nodded, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. "Do it, and prepare to jump to hyperspace on my mark." The Prometheus's weapons redirected, focusing their firepower on the Xeno warship's vulnerability. The enemy vessel shuddered under the onslaught, its shields flickering and fading. But just as victory seemed within reach, a new threat emerged. "Sir, we have incoming fighters," a sensor officer shouted. "They're launching from the Xeno warship." Dozens of sleek, deadly fighters swarmed towards the Prometheus, their weapons blazing with deadly precision. The Prometheus's point defense systems sprang into action, filling the void with a web of laser fire, but the sheer number of fighters overwhelmed the defenses. Explosions rocked the Prometheus as the fighters strafed the ship's hull, causing alarms to blare throughout the bridge. Zara gritted her teeth, her mind racing as she sought a solution. "We need to take out those fighters," she said, turning to Admiral Thorne. "Permission to lead a squadron and engage them directly?" Admiral Thorne hesitated for a moment, weighing the risks. "Granted, but be careful out there, Commander. We can't afford to lose you." Zara nodded, determination etched on her face. She turned to Raven. "Keep the antidote safe. I'll be back." With a final glance at the view screen, Zara raced from the bridge aside, heading towards the hangar bay. As she suited up and climbed into her fighter, she felt a surge of adrenaline coursing through her veins. This was what she had trained for, the moment where her skills and courage would be put to the ultimate test. As Zara led her squadron out into the fray, she knew that the fate of the Prometheus and the future of humanity hung in the balance. The Xenofighters swarmed around them, their weapons flashing in the void. But Zara and her team fought back with everything they had, their own weapons finding their marks with deadly accuracy. The battle raged on, the void lit up with the fiery dance of destruction. And as Zara pushed her fighter to its limits, she knew that this was only the beginning. The road to the colony and the salvation of their species would be paved with sacrifice and hardship. But with the antidote in their possession and the indomitable spirit of humanity driving them forward, they would not rest until they had secured a future for their people. Chapter 5. The Price of Victory. Zara's fighter weaved through the swarm of Xenofighters, her hands gripping the controls tightly. The chaos of the battle filled her cockpit, the comms alive with the chatter of her squad mates as they engaged the enemy. She locked onto a Xenofighter, her weapons systems humming with power. "I've got you now," she muttered, squeezing the trigger. A burst of laser fire erupted from her fighter, slicing through the enemy's shields and reducing it to a cloud of debris. But the victory was short-lived. 2 more Xenofighters fell in behind her, their weapons peppering her shields. Zara jinked and rolled, trying to evade their fire, but the fighters clung to her tail with relentless determination. "Commander, you've got 2 on your 6. Raven's voice crackled over the comms. "I'm coming to assist." Zara glanced at her sensor display, seeing Raven's fighter racing towards her. "Negative, Raven. Stay with the Prometheus. They need you there." "But Zara—" "That's an order, Lieutenant," Zara snapped, her voice firm. She knew the risks, and she wouldn't let Raven share them. Gritting her teeth, Zara threw her fighter into a dizzying spiral, the G-forces pressing her back into her seat. The Xenofighters struggled to keep up, their shots going wide. Seizing the opportunity, Zara pulled back on the controls, flipping her fighter end over end and coming up behind her pursuers. With a quick burst of fire, she reduced them to expanding clouds of gas and debris. But the fight was far from over. The Xenofighters continued to swarm the Prometheus, their numbers seeming to multiply with each passing moment. Zara and her squadron fought valiantly, their skills and determination pushed to the limit. On the bridge of the Prometheus, Admiral Thorne watched the battle unfold with growing concern. The ship shuddered under the onslaught, its shields weakening with each blow. "We can't take much more of this," he growled. "What's the status of the hyperdrive?" "It's fully charged, sir," a technician reported. "But we need to clear a path through the fighters to make the jump." Admiral Thorne's jaw tightened. He knew what needed to be done. "Recall our fighters. We're going to make a run for it." Zara's heart sank as the order came through. She had hoped to buy the Prometheus more time, to thin the enemy's ranks and give them a fighting chance. But she knew that the Admiral's decision was the right one. The antidote was too important to risk. With a heavy heart, Zara led her battered squadron back to the Prometheus, weaving through the sea of enemy fighters. As they approached the hangar bay, a Xenofighter slipped through their defenses, its weapons locked onto Zara's ship. Time seemed to slow as Zara saw the enemy's shots racing towards her. She closed her eyes, bracing for the impact. But it never came. Instead, Raven's fighter appeared in front of her, taking the full brunt of the blast. Zara watched in horror as Raven's ship exploded, the debris scattering across the void. "Raven!" Zara screamed, her voice raw with anguish. But there was no response, only the cold silence of the void. With tears streaming down her face, Zara guided her fighter into the hangar bay, her heart heavy with the weight of Raven's sacrifice. As she climbed from the cockpit, she saw Admiral Thorne waiting for her, his face grim. "Raven didn't make it," Zara said, her voice barely above a whisper. Admiral Thorne placed a hand on her shoulder, his eyes filled with sorrow. "Her sacrifice will not be forgotten, but we must press on. The colony needs us." Zara nodded, her grief giving way to a renewed sense of purpose. As the Prometheus leaped into hyperspace, leaving the Xeno warship behind, she knew that the price of victory had been high. But she also knew that Raven's sacrifice had not been in vain. They would carry on, fighting for the future of their species, no matter the cost. Chapter 6. The Echoes of Sacrifice. The blue-white swirl of hyperspace filled the viewports of the Prometheus as the ship hurtled through the void, leaving the echoes of battle behind. In the somber silence of the hangar bay, Zara stood motionless, her flight suit still clinging to her sweat-drenched body. The weight of Raven's sacrifice hung heavy in the air, a palpable presence that seemed to suffocate the very life from the room. Around her, the crew of the Prometheus moved with a subdued urgency, tending to the wounded and repairing the damage inflicted by the Xeno onslaught. But Zara barely registered their presence, her mind lost in a haze of grief and guilt. Raven had been more than just a fellow pilot. She had been a friend, a sister in arms, and now she was gone, her life snuffed out in a single selfless act. Admiral Thorne approached Zara, his weathered face etched with lines of sorrow and determination. "Commander Zara, I know this is a difficult time, but we need to discuss our next steps." Zara looked up at him, her eyes red-rimmed and haunted. "How many more, Admiral? How many more lives will we lose before this is over?" "I wish I had an answer for you," Admiral Thorne said, his voice heavy with the burden of command. "But we both know that this fight is far from over. The Xenos will not rest until they have destroyed every last trace of humanity. We must stay strong, for the sake of those we have lost, and those who still depend on us." Zara nodded, drawing in a shuddering breath. Raven believed in our mission. She believed in the colony and the hope it represents. I won't let her sacrifice be in vain. "None of us will," Admiral Thorne assured her. "But to honor her memory, we must focus on the task at hand. The road to the colony is still fraught with danger, and we will need every ounce of our strength and ingenuity to make it through." As if on cue, the ship's intercom crackled to life. "Admiral Thorne, your presence is requested on the bridge." With a final nod to Zara, Admiral Thorne strode away, his steps heavy with purpose. Zara watched him go, feeling a flicker of determination amidst the grief that threatened to consume her. She knew that the road ahead would be long and perilous, but she also knew that she could not falter now. Too much depended on their success, on the survival of the antidote that represented humanity's last hope. Squaring her shoulders, Zara made her way to the command center, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. As she walked, she could almost feel Raven's presence beside her, urging her onward. In that moment, Zara made a silent vow to honor her friend's memory, to protect the antidote at all costs, and to fight for the future of her species, no matter the price. The command center was a hive of activity as Zara entered, the crew working frantically to assess the damage and plot their next move. Admiral Thorne stood at the center of it all, his face a mask of grim determination. "Commander Zara, I'm glad you're here," he said, beckoning her forward. "We've detected a series of anomalies along our planned route, and I need your expertise to help us navigate them." Zara nodded, her mind already racing with possibilities. She knew that the journey to the colony would be fraught with danger, but she was ready to face it head-on. For Raven, for the antidote, and for the future of humanity, she would not fail. As she bent over the console, studying the data streaming across the screen, Zara felt a sense of purpose wash over her. The echoes of Raven's sacrifice would forever reverberate through her heart, but they would also fuel her determination to see their mission through to the end. No matter the cost, no matter the odds, they would persevere. For in the face of annihilation, hope was the only currency that mattered, and Zara would not let it slip through her fingers. Chapter 7. Navigating the Unknown. The command center buzzed with a palpable tension as Zara pored over the data, her brow furrowed in concentration. The anomalies that lay ahead were unlike anything they had encountered before, a twisting maze of gravitational distortions and electromagnetic interference that threatened to tear the Prometheus apart. Admiral Thorne leaned over her shoulder, his eyes scanning the readouts with a practiced gaze. "What do you make of it, Commander?" Zara shook her head, frustration evident in her voice. "It's like nothing I've ever seen. The distortions are too strong, too chaotic. If we try to navigate them blindly, we'll be torn to shreds." "There must be a way through," Admiral Thorne insisted, his jaw set with determination. "We've come too far to be stopped now." Zara nodded, her mind racing with possibilities. She thought back to her training, to the countless hours she had spent studying the intricacies of hyperspace navigation. And then, like a bolt of lightning, an idea struck her. "The anomalies are interconnected," she said, her fingers flying across the console as she brought up a new set of schematics. "If we can map out the resonance frequencies between them, we might be able to chart a safe path through." Admiral Thorne's eyes widened with understanding. "But to do that, we'd need to send out probes, gather data from inside the anomalies themselves." "It's risky," Zara acknowledged, "but it's our only chance. We'll have to move quickly and stay vigilant. There's no telling what we might find in there." With a nod of approval from Admiral Thorne, Zara set to work, assembling a team of the Prometheus' best engineers and scientists. Together, they worked tirelessly, designing and building the specialized probes that would be their eyes and ears in the heart of the anomalies. As the first probe was launched, the command center fell silent, every eye fixed on the view screens as it hurtled into the swirling maelstrom of energy. For a moment, there was nothing but static, a haze of interference that seemed to swallow the probe whole. But then, like a beacon in the darkness, the data began to stream in, a cascade of numbers and readings that painted a picture of the anomalies in stunning detail. Zara and her team worked feverishly, analyzing the data and mapping out the resonance frequencies, charting a course through the chaos. It was a delicate dance, a high-stakes game of cat and mouse as they navigated the treacherous path, the Prometheus shuddering and groaning under the strain. But with each successful maneuver, each narrow escape, the crew's spirits lifted, a glimmer of hope amidst the darkness. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, it was over. The Prometheus emerged from the anomalies, battered but unbroken, the colony's coordinates blinking steadily on the view screens. Zara let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding, her heart hammering in her chest. They had made it through, but she knew that the true test still lay ahead. The colony was within reach, but so too were the Xenos, their relentless pursuit never far behind. As she looked around the command center, at the faces of her crewmates, Zara saw a flicker of something in their eyes, a glimmer of determination that mirrored her own. They had come this far, had sacrificed so much, and they would not falter now. For Raven, for the antidote, and for the future of their species, they would fight on, no matter the cost. The Prometheus hurtled through the stars, a beacon of hope amidst the darkness, carrying with it the last remnants of humanity and the promise of a new beginning. And though the road ahead was uncertain, one thing was clear. They would face it together, united in their resolve to survive, to endure, and to forge a new path among the stars. Chapter 8. The Colony. The Prometheus emerged from the anomalies, its hull battered and scarred, a testament to the trials it had endured. On the bridge, Zara stood beside Admiral Thorne, their eyes fixed on the view screen as the colony came into view. It was a sight that took their breath away, a shimmering jewel of a planet, its surface a tapestry of lush forests and glittering oceans. "We made it," Admiral Thorne whispered, his voice thick with emotion. After all this time, all the sacrifices were finally here. Zara nodded, her heart swelling with a mix of relief and trepidation. The colony represented a new beginning, a chance to start over and rebuild what they had lost. But she knew that the challenges ahead would be no less daunting than those they had already faced. As the Prometheus entered orbit, a hail came through on the comms, the voice of the colony's governor crackling with static. "Prometheus, this is Colony Control. We've been expecting you. Please proceed to Docking Bay Alpha 1. Admiral Thorne acknowledged the hail, his voice steady and confident. "Colony Control, this is Admiral Thorne of the Prometheus. We have the antidote on board and are ready to deliver it to your medical team." There was a pause, a moment of silence that seemed to stretch on for an eternity. And then the governor's voice came through once more, this time tinged with a note of urgency. "Admiral, we have a situation. The Xenos have launched an attack on the colony. They're targeting our defenses and trying to breach the perimeter. We need your help." Zara felt a chill run down her spine, the weight of their mission bearing down on her like a physical force. They had come so far, had fought so hard, only to face one final, desperate battle. Admiral Thorne turned to her, his eyes blazing with determination. "Commander, I need you to lead a team to the surface, get the antidote to the medical facility, and do whatever it takes to keep it safe. The fate of our species depends on it." Zara nodded, her jaw set with resolve. She gathered a team of her most trusted crewmates, including a squad of the Prometheus's fiercest warriors, and prepared to depart for the surface. As they boarded the shuttle, Zara felt a hand on her shoulder. She turned to see Admiral Thorne, his face etched with a mix of pride and concern. "Commander, I know I don't need to tell you what's at stake here, but I want you to know that I have faith in you. You've proven yourself time and again, and I know that you'll do whatever it takes to see this through." Zara nodded, her throat tight with emotion. "Thank you, Admiral. I won't let you down." With that, she boarded the shuttle, the doors sealing behind her with a hiss of hydraulics. As they descended towards the colony's surface, Zara could see the chaos unfolding below, the flashes of weapons fire and the plumes of smoke rising from the embattled defenses. She knew that the battle ahead would be the fight of their lives, a desperate struggle against an enemy that had already taken so much from them. But she also knew that they had no choice. The antidote was their last hope, the key to their survival, and they would defend it with their very lives. As the shuttle touched down and the doors opened, Zara and her team emerged into the fray, weapons at the ready. They fought their way through the chaos, dodging enemy fire and cutting down Xeno warriors with ruthless efficiency. Step by step, they pushed towards the medical facility, the antidote clutched tightly in Zara's hands. And though the battle raged around them, though the odds seemed insurmountable, Zara knew that they would not fail. For the sake of their species, for the memory of those they had lost, they would fight on until the very end. Chapter 9. The Battle for the Colony. Zara and her team fought their way through the chaos of the colony's streets, the sounds of battle ringing in their ears. The Xeno warriors seemed to be everywhere, their sleek, armored forms darting through the smoke and debris with terrifying speed and agility. But Zara's team was no less formidable. They moved as one, a well-oiled machine of deadly precision, cutting down the enemy with every step. Zara led from the front, her weapon blazing, her eyes narrowed with determination. As they neared the medical facility, the resistance intensified. The Xenos had clearly identified their target and were throwing everything they had at it. Energy blasts sizzled through the air, exploding against the buildings and sending shards of metal and concrete flying in all directions. Zara ducked behind a shattered wall, her heart pounding in her chest. She glanced at her team, saw the fear and determination in their eyes, and knew that they would follow her to the end. "We're almost there," she shouted over the din of battle. "Just a little further. We can do this." With a roar of defiance, they surged forward, charging headlong into the enemy lines. The Xenos met them head-on, their weapons flashing, their voices raised in a chilling battle cry. But Zara's team would not be denied. They fought with a ferocity born of desperation, born of the knowledge that the fate of their species hung in the balance. They pushed forward, step by bloody step, until at last they reached the entrance to the medical facility. Zara kicked open the doors, her weapon at the ready. Inside, the scene was one of chaos and confusion. Doctors and nurses scrambled to tend to the wounded, while soldiers fought to hold back the Xeno advance. Zara spotted the head doctor, a grizzled veteran with a determined set to his jaw. She rushed to his side, the antidote clutched tightly in her hand. "We have it," she said, her voice raw with emotion. "The antidote. It's here." The doctor's eyes widened, a flicker of hope crossing his face. He took the vial from her hand, cradling it like a precious treasure. "We'll take it from here," he said, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. "Get back out there and give them hell. We'll do our part to make sure this was all worth it." Zara nodded, a fierce grin spreading across her face. She turned to her team, saw the fire in their eyes, and knew that they were ready for whatever came next. Together, they charged back out into the fray, their weapons blazing, their spirits unbroken. They fought with a savage joy, a sense of purpose that transcended the horror of the battlefield. And though the battle raged on, though the Xenos pressed their attack with relentless fury, Zara and her team held the line. They fought for the future of their species, for the memory of those they had lost, and for the hope that the antidote represented. In the end, it was a battle that would be remembered for generations, a turning point in the war against the Xenos. And though the cost was high, though the sacrifices were many, Zara knew that it had all been worth it. For in that moment, as the antidote was administered to the first patient, as the first signs of hope began to spread through the colony, Zara knew that they had achieved something truly remarkable. They had struck a blow against the darkness, had lit a candle in the night. And though the road ahead would be long and hard, though the challenges would be many, Zara knew that they would face them together, united in their determination to build a better future for all of humanity. Chapter 10. A Glimmer of Hope. In the aftermath of the battle, an eerie calm settled over the colony. The sounds of gunfire and explosions had faded, replaced by the moans of the wounded and the murmured prayers of the survivors. Zara and her team stood amidst the wreckage, their armor scorched and their faces streaked with sweat and grime. They had fought with everything they had, holding the line against the Xeno onslaught. And though the cost had been high, they had succeeded in their mission. The antidote was safe, and the doctors were already administering it to the first patients. Zara watched as a young girl, her face pale and drawn, received the first dose. She held her breath, her heart pounding in her chest, as she waited for a sign that it had worked. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, color began to return to the girl's cheeks. Her eyes fluttered open, and a small smile played across her lips. A cheer went up from the gathered survivors, a sound of pure joy and relief. Zara felt a lump rise in her throat, tears pricking at the corners of her eyes. She had fought for so long, had sacrificed so much, and now, at last, there was a glimmer of hope. But even as the celebrations began, Zara knew that their work was far from over. The Xenos were still out there, still a threat to the colony and to all of humanity. They would need to fortify their defenses, to build up their strength and prepare for the battles to come. Zara turned to her team, saw the determination in their eyes, and knew that they were ready for whatever lay ahead. They had proven themselves in the crucible of battle, had forged an unbreakable bond of trust and loyalty. "We've won a great victory today," she said, her voice ringing out clear and strong. "But the war is not over. The Xenos will be back, and we must be ready for them. We must rebuild, and we must fight on. For the future of our species, for the memory of those we have lost, and for the hope that now burns bright within us." Her words were met with a roar of approval, a sound that echoed through the shattered streets of the colony. And as Zara looked out over the sea of faces, she saw not just soldiers and survivors, but a people united in their resolve to forge a new path among the stars. The road ahead would be long and hard, fraught with danger and uncertainty. But Zara knew that they would face it together, bound by their shared purpose and their unbreakable spirit. They were the last of humanity, the guardians of the future, and they would not rest until their species was safe and thriving once more. With a final nod to her team, Zara turned and strode forward, her head held high and her heart filled with hope. The battle for the colony was over, but the fight for the future had only just begun. Chapter 11. The Gathering Storm. In the days that followed the battle for the colony, a sense of renewed purpose and determination swept through the survivors. Under Zara's leadership, they began the arduous task of rebuilding and fortifying their defenses, knowing that the Xenos would return with a vengeance. As the colony slowly recovered, whispers of a growing Xeno fleet at the edge of the system reached Zara's ears. She knew that time was running out and that they needed to act quickly to prepare for the impending attack. Zara called for a gathering of the colony's leaders and her most trusted allies. In a dimly lit room, they pored over star maps and intelligence reports, searching for a way to turn the tide of the war. "We can't just sit here and wait for them to come to us," Zara said, her brow furrowed in concentration. "We need to take the fight to them, to hit them where they least expect it." Murmurs of agreement filled the room, and soon a plan began to take shape. They would send a small, elite team to infiltrate the Xenofleet and gather crucial information about their plans and weaknesses. Zara volunteered to lead the mission herself, knowing that it was a risk, but also understanding that she was the best person for the job. She had faced the Xenos before and had emerged victorious, and she was determined to do so again. As preparations for the mission began, a sense of urgency and tension filled the air. Everyone knew that the fate of the colony, and perhaps all of humanity, rested on the success of Zara's team. In the midst of the preparations, Zara took a moment to reflect on how far they had come. From the desperate flight from Earth to the battle for the colony, they had faced impossible odds and had emerged stronger for it. She thought of Raven, of the sacrifice she had made to save Zara's life, and felt a renewed sense of purpose and resolve. She would not let Raven's death be in vain, and she would fight with everything she had to ensure that humanity had a future. As the day of the mission approached, Zara gathered her team and looked each of them in the eye. "We've been through hell together," she said, her voice steady and strong. "And we'll go through hell again, if that's what it takes. But we will not fail. We will not let the Xenos win. We are the last hope of humanity, and we will fight until our last breath." With those words ringing in their ears, Zara and her team set out into the unknown, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The gathering storm was upon them, but they would meet it head-on, united in their resolve to save their species and forge a new future among the stars. Chapter 12. Into the Belly of the Beast. The vast expanse of space stretched out before Zara and her team as their sleek, black stealth ship slipped silently through the void. The weight of their mission hung heavy in the air, a palpable presence that each member of the team could feel in their bones. Zara sat at the helm, her eyes fixed on the view screen, scanning for any sign of the Xenofleet. Beside her, Jace, the team's tech expert, worked furiously to maintain their cloaking device and monitor for any signs of detection. As they drew closer to the coordinates of the Xenofleet, a sense of unease began to grow among the team. They had faced the Xenos before, but never like this, never on their own turf. Suddenly, the ship's sensors began to scream, and the view screen filled with the sight of a massive Xeno dreadnought, its hull bristling with weapons and its engines burning with an eerie, sickly light. "We've got company," Zara said grimly, her hands flying over the controls as she worked to keep the ship hidden. "Jace, what's our status?" "Cloaking device is holding steady," Jace replied, his voice tight with tension. "But we won't be able to stay hidden for long. We need to find a way inside that ship." Zara nodded, her mind racing as she considered their options. Then a plan began to take shape. "We'll use the Dreadnought's own defenses against it. she said. Jace, can you rig up a feedback loop in their sensor array? Jace grinned, his fingers already dancing across his console. Give me 5 minutes. As Jace worked, Zara turned to the rest of the team. Once we're inside, we'll split up. Sorry, Katie, you're with me. We'll head for the bridge and try to access their command systems. Lena, Tor, you'll make your way to the engine room and plant the explosives. We'll rendezvous back at the ship once we have what we need. The team nodded, their faces set with grim determination. They knew the risks, knew that this mission could be their last, but they also knew what was at stake, and they were ready to do whatever it took to give humanity a fighting chance. As the stealth ship glided silently towards the dreadnought, Zara felt a sense of calm settle over her. She thought of the colony, of the brave men and women who were counting on them to succeed. And she thought of Raven, of the sacrifice she had made so that Zara could be here now, fighting for the future. We're in, Jace said suddenly, his voice taut with excitement. Feedback loop is in place. We should be able to slip right past their sensors. Zara nodded, a fierce smile spreading across her face. Let's do this, she said, as the stealth ship plunged forward, disappearing into the belly of the beast. As they made their way deeper into the heart of the Xeno dreadnought, Zara and her team could feel the weight of the alien ship pressing down on them. The corridors were dark and twisted, filled with strange, organic shapes that seemed to pulse with a sickly inner light. But they pressed on, driven by the knowledge that the fate of humanity rested on their shoulders. And with each step they took, they grew more determined to see their mission through to the end, no matter the cost.